So good morning. Good morning. I just want to do a quick survey. How many of you teach math? Great. How many of you would say that you're a math person? How many of you would say, well, this is our math editorial team going, I'm not sure. How many of you would say, you know, I'm not really a math person? And how many of you have students who would say, I'm definitely not a math person? You are all math people. We're born to do math. We come out of the womb with mathematical underpinnings. We're able to make comparisons. Is there more of this versus something else? We're able to do that. That's an ability that researchers at Johns Hopkins actually have tracked, and we get better at it as we grow older until we're in our 30s. And then it starts to decline, which explains why it's just recently started to decline for me. But these among you and among your students, those who believe that they're just not math people, it's really tough. And that's the folks I want to talk about. And so I want to give you permission. I'm from Boston. I'm in New York. I want to give you permission to boo on the next slide. But when you think about the kids and colleagues who are not math people, they're not in the game. They're not on the bench saying, put me in, give me a math problem, I can't wait. They're not in the stands cheering, go, math, do it. They're someplace else. They're in the parking lot, they're on the street, they're someplace else, and they're not doing the math. It really doesn't matter what kind of intervention or program we put in front of them if they're not playing the game, if they're not trying. So what I really want to talk about is how do we get these kids to try? And historically, it's kind of fun to look and say, how have we tried to re-engage students who aren't that interested? They're just not that into school. And there's a historical tendency here to actually, you can see the phrase, and it usually starts, you know how kids love? That's what we're going to do. You hear it a lot now. You know how kids love video games? That's what we're going to do. We're going to put education, math in video games, and they're just going to love to do it. That's how we're going to get them engaged and excited. And some of it's kind of interesting. Some of it is really bad. The one I hate the most is where it's like, do the math and you get to play a video game. And what does that say about the math? Right? You know, you think it's distasteful, so we have to, you know, it's broccoli, and you're not, if you don't eat it, you don't get your dessert of the video game. That's definitely the wrong message. But it's not the first time that we've had this, you know how kids love, let's just embed the distasteful education in it. Not that long ago, it's, you know how kids love computers? That's what we're going to do. We're going to put these things together, and it's going to be so exciting. Kids are going to want to do it all the time. We hear it a lot about, you know how kids love those iPads and tablets? That's what we're going to do. Let's buy those things, and everything's going to be great. Before that, you know how kids love television? All right, that's what we're going to do. In the 1950s, Hagerstown, Maryland was a model school for television education. And that's what they're going to do. We're going to put all that stuff in there, because you know how kids, they're just glued to it. There's a school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was asked in the 80s to be on the board of that school as a school of the future for computers. The school is called the Tobin School. At the time, or until recently, I think one of the best known facts about the school is one of the teachers was named Chris Affleck, Ben's mom. Great teacher, did a lot of testing in her classroom years ago. But I got a tour of the school when I was asked to be on the board of a computer school of the future there. And I'm going into the classrooms, and in every one of the classrooms, there's these big brackets sticking out of the wall up high, just brackets. And I said, what are those? And they said, oh, we used to be a school of the future for television. And then some weekend, parents came in and took the televisions out. And a month later, teachers said, there's something different in here. So this wave after wave, here it was again. This is going to be great. You know how kids love doing this? Before that, in the 40s, you know how kids love radio? I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember watching radio. In our first house where I was born, we had a big radio built into the wall. And that was our initial sort of, that was great. That was fun. Listening to radio. You know how kids love doing this. And there were radio coordinators in school. There were books written about teachers to how to change the tubes in the radios, because sometimes the technology got a little flaky. I know you never have that problem anymore. But it was great. And there were one of these journals, let's see, Harlem, New York, and Oakland, California, were model schools for radio and education. And they did really innovative things, like they broadcast multiple choice tests to large auditoriums. Like, wow, that's really cutting edge. There's a great picture in one of these journals on broadcast radio in education. There were journals written for this stuff. And it's pictures of people like this with the radio here, and the caption underneath is something like, "A lecture on radio is even more boring than one in person." Oh, duh. But this was going to be great. Everybody's going to love this stuff. Before that, 1911, Thomas Edison predicted we wouldn't even need schools. They would disappear, and everybody would go to movie houses to get all their education. Now, we're talking in the early 1900s, silent movies. Most of them for education produced by the Department of Agriculture. So they were talking silent movies on potato blight and ringworm. This was not doing it. And Thomas Edison's predicting, but you know how kids love going to movies. They're lining up to go to popular entertainment. That's what we got to do. I think one quote is, "A big army with swords and guns wouldn't keep kids out of school." Now, I've seen something like big armies, not with swords, but with guns around schools. It's not because kids are so excited about learning, because they're getting to go watch movies. But there's this, everybody loves this. That's what we're going to do. Before that, magic lanterns. 19th century, 1880s. How many people remember those? So this was a magic lantern. It was like an early version of an overhead projector, but it used flame. But people would gather in auditoriums or in parlors to watch lantern shows. It's like everybody loves seeing these big pictures on the wall. It's so cool. And so they put them into schools, and there were lantern coordinators and books written about how to do this and how teachers can make these glass slides, because this is great. And of course, to use these, you had to cover the windows to make it dark in the room. And there's a great quote from one of these journals or one of these reports from a school board report looking in schools. And it's something like, "In darkness, children are drawn to disorder." Really? Wow. So what happened? They darken the room. What do kids do? They start just throwing spitballs at each other. And the teacher's like, no, you gotta be taking notes on this. And the kid says, but it's too dark to take notes. So what they suggested, seriously, this was the suggestion, is that you have each one of your students bring in his or her own personal hooded candle. So here you have a flame-based projection system and 50 little candles in these old wooden schoolhouses. Not a good idea. So time after time, we're looking at what's popular. Popular entertainment, that's what's going to do it. That's how we're going to re-engage our kids. And it just doesn't work. It fades. It's a passing fancy. We really have to look at fundamentally what motivates humans, which includes most of your students. I'm not going to vouch for all of them, but I would say that most of your students are, in fact, human beings. And so what are the underlying drives for human behavior to get us to do stuff? And so fortunately, the Center on Education Policy within the last year actually did a wonderful summary of the research on student motivation. And how many are people familiar with the book Drive, Daniel Pink? Okay, great. So it's the same research. You'll see a lot of similarities here. So they define 4 key elements for what drives motivation, assuming that the basic needs are in place, that kids aren't hungry, that they feel secure. If those aren't in place, it's hard. You have to get those in place. But once those are in place, what drives us? And this isn't just true for students. It's also true for you and your colleagues. So one of them is we like being good at something. We like seeing ourselves getting better at something. Competence, progress. We like feeling that that success that we have is because of what we did. We like doing things that we choose to participate in. Choice, autonomy, agency. We like doing things that are interesting, that we think have value. That drives us. It's worth doing this because I like it. It feels good. It's going to help me get somewhere. There's value and purpose in it. And we like doing things that allow us to be part of a community. So I want to talk about these 4 elements. And the interesting thing is, what we say, you know how kids love video games? These characteristics are often found in games. So it's really looking at what's the research that makes things engaging. And how can we now apply that to these kids that are not necessarily that engaged, particularly in math. So I want to talk about that first one, because you may have heard this before. When am I ever going to use this? Right? And we get this in math more than in any other subject. I mean, how many times have you heard your kids say, when am I ever going to use this Harry Potter thing? Right? It's like I'm never going to cast a spell. Right? There's no practical value. But we do hold math up to this standard because, well, you know, it's just not that interesting. But it's not like kids don't do things that aren't practical. I mean, when are you ever going to use this? How many of you do Candy Crush? Not that many. I'm so impressed, unless you're lying to yourselves, which is probably more likely. But I could put Angry Birds up there. How many of you do Angry Birds? All right. It's just, you're just not being, either you're oh, I don't know what to think about you yet. We'll give it some time. But kids are constantly doing things that have no practical value, but they're fun. They're interesting. And so we want to have things in the short term that are engaging. We want to give kids interesting problems. And we want to make sure that things have long-term value. Most games have a narrative component or a path that you're following. It's a pretty shallow one in Candy Crush. But getting through this interesting puzzle moves me forward. I want to get to the end. I have a vision of where something is heading. So there's that short term, the task being interesting, and there's the long term of this is helping me get somewhere. For kids who are on a path to college, they know, I'm going to college. Their parents know, you're going to college. They're not the ones asking, when am I ever going to use this? They know they need to do well in math because that's my path to get to college. I need it for where I'm headed. For kids who are unclear about their future, who don't have a sense of how this fits into their path, they're the ones who are wondering, what is this for? So the research says it doesn't work to tell students, if you don't do this, you're not getting into college. If you don't do this, you're not going to get a job. That kind of warning, if you don't do it, actually tends to decrease performance. That's kind of weird. If students self-generate the need, performance goes up. So they did this little study. There are all these examples of these psychosocial interventions, but they did this study going into a unit. They had students, half the students wrote a letter about why what they were about to do was, or how they were going to bring values of hard work. Why is hard work and attention and focus a good thing in general heading into this unit of study? And then they had the other students write about why those characteristics were good for them heading into this bit of study. Like, why is it good to do well in here for me? Why is it good to do well in general? They sealed up those letters. Teachers had no idea which student had written the general one and which ones had personalized it. At the end of the year, for students who were high achieving, this was a mixed group. They did this in maybe at Oakland, California. A large percentage of the students were low achievers, high African American population. So there's this racial achievement gap in there. For high achievers, there was really no difference. For the low achievers, it almost made the achievement gap disappear. For those who'd personalized it. It's like it just changed their frame of reference. They said, this is important for me. Nobody told them, why do you need to do this? They generated it. So getting kids to see it for themselves works. The research suggests telling them, not so good. So what do we do here? So what does it mean to make something interesting? So here's a problem for you guys. Which of these 4 numbers doesn't belong? 16. Okay, so I heard, who said 9? No, you don't count. Who said, I'm sorry, she counts, of course. Of course you count. Aaron, why does 9 not belong? Because it only has 1 digit. Somebody said 16? No, but somebody said 16. I know people are saying 43. I'll get to you, okay? So, all right. So 16, 9, 1 digit. 16, it's even. Any other reason 16 doesn't belong? No? Any other reason 9 doesn't belong? Yes.
When I add the digits, they were 7, and that one wasn't.
So 1 and 6 is 7, 2 and 5 is 7, 4 and 3 is 7, 9 doesn't give you 7. That's also another reason. 16, it's even. 20, any reason? Anybody think 25 doesn't belong? I don't think 25 belongs. Why? Okay. Oh, see, this is great. You want to know, like, how? It isn't enough to just say, I don't think it belongs. You got to know why. That's important. So why? Because the 1 digit is the only one that isn't a multiple of 3. Now, I was working with Baltimore County teachers yesterday, and one of them came up and said, 25 is the only one where you rotate it around. It's the same. It's got a symmetry that the others don't have. It's like, really? Wait a minute. It's like, he didn't want to tell her. He came up to me afterwards because it's like, I know I'm a little geeky. But anyway, that's kind of cool. How many people think 43 doesn't belong? Why doesn't 43 belong? Not a perfect square. All of these are right answers. So this is not a complicated thing, but immediately you're able to engage. The nice thing about a problem like this, it's accessible at many levels. I don't even have to know what a perfect square is to be able to say 9 doesn't belong because it's only 1 number versus 2 numbers. I don't even have to know the difference between number and digit. I can participate so that it's accessible to kids at all kinds of different levels. And when I said 25, you're just like, why? It's not just discussable, it begs discussion. It begs explanation. So this kind of thing, it's just a simple little puzzle. Simple. But it's a way to engage kids. So having problems, not all your problems being like this, but having opportunities for kids to engage. It's not like I have to make, when I was doing math in the 70s, we made things relevant and interesting by writing problems about pizza and drugs. It was the 70s. But that really didn't work because everybody knew it's like, that's still a word problem. And I just don't care. Did everybody get enough drugs? It doesn't really matter. I meant pizza. Did I? But here I'm not trying to force a context on here. It's just a simple way to get people engaged. Now, context can be a way to get people in. Dan Meyer, people familiar with Dan Meyer? Great innovative math teacher. And he talks about math in 3 acts, about setting up interesting problems for kids like it's a story. Often problems start with, here's how you do it, now here's a problem. So it's got this explanation before you give the problem. It's like, why are you telling me all this stuff? He says, start with the problem. And he gives an example of one. It's like, which is better? I've got 2 coupons. One's $20 off, one's 20% off. Which is better? Better when? I can fill that problem with all kinds of math. Is it better $20 off or 20% off if it costs $13.95? If it costs $49.95? If it costs $100? Which one's better? When does it make a difference? And so you start with the story to set up a drama, and that gives you a reason to learn the math. Here it is. Try it. Now, we need to explain it. Now I can teach this to you. But making things interesting by giving kids a little drama story that unfolds, where they don't necessarily know what to do. And he does this because this is what he's found in his teaching, but the research actually supports this model. A group of researchers, Van Lane and other people, were looking at what makes good tutors successful. What happens in a good tutoring experience? And what he found is it works when you let students first reach an impasse, to get stuck. And it's like, this is human nature. How many of you read manuals before you get a new phone or new whatever? How many of you read the manual first? Okay, you're the one that everybody waits for. And then when they get stuck, they ask you, how do you do this now? But typically, we dive into things, and when we get stuck is when we go find it out. So let's let kids get stuck a little bit. Because then prompt them to find the right step and explain it. This is what good tutors do. I get you stuck. Well, try it. See what you can do. And only after they try it and fail do I say, OK, here's how we do it. Now, the problem with this is that for a lot of kids, they get stuck. They don't try. They stop. So setting up an impasse that we got to focus on their belief. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But making things interesting, we can do that But that only works if people can participate at this level. So having problems that kids at all levels can engage in, that's great. Setting up an impasse can be motivating, but only if you believe you can get through that. So that's the short-term piece, but also the long-term. Where does solving this problem, where does doing this math head? And so giving people a vision of where math lives is great. So I don't know if people are familiar with the Futures Channel. It's a website that has all these videos about STEM careers and where math lives. And so giving kids a sense of who they might want to be would be great. We've taken that. I've been working with Scholastic on a new program called Math 180. And one of the things that we've done is to try and really pull this together, to give kids a sense of purpose beyond the problem. Why do I need to learn the math? Not trying to do it for every single skill, but in general, why do I need to do well in math? Where's that going to take me? So I want to share with you a video that we use. This is about fractions, but it's light. And I want to talk about the characteristics in here, about situating the math in real stories to engage kids.
As an all-state tackle, Tyreen Dudley is a football star who will one day make it to the NFL. But right now, his future is riding on a different goal. Salad.
No, you got
It's a day long at Frankfurt High School's culinary arts class, where students are preparing to go up against high school seniors all over Philadelphia in a cooking competition worth thousands in scholarships for college and top culinary schools. Their teacher, Miss Stephenson, knows what's at stake, so she pushes her kids hard. Really hard.
Somebody get the pickles.
Some people will crumble under pressure because you always want you like very fast. Talking out of top right there. Chop.
Yes, there is a right way to chop, and professional techniques for dicing, slicing, whipping, flipping, boiling, brushing, and separating the yolk from the white. But that's not all that separates a good cook from a top chef. Precise measurements are important, and sometimes you need to double a recipe or add half as much seasoning. Miss Stephenson shows her students how to adjust ingredients when they need to.
We're not going to do it like you think, sis. We're going to do it our own way, okay?
To cut down on the full stick of butter in this apple pie topping, the students cut 1 stick of butter into 4 equal pieces, or fourths, setting 1/4 aside and using just 3/4 of a stick. Of course, the best way to confirm that your dish needs a little more of this or a little less of that is to taste it. The judges look for other things, too. Real chefs must look at sizes and shapes of all the professional knife cuts, and the fancy French names that go with them. A julienne may look just like a bâtonnet, but one is 1/8 of an inch wide and the other is 1/4 of an inch. Even dice cuts come in 3 sizes. Small dice is 1/4 of an inch on each side, medium dice is 1/2 an inch, and large is 3/4 of an inch. It takes practice and precision to get everything right, but to students like Erica Gaither, it's totally worth it.
I just convinced myself that if I just stay focused on my goal, it eventually all will. If I had the opportunity that so many people get, why wouldn't I take it?
Whether their goal is to be a chef, own a restaurant, or work in a commercial kitchen, these students' culinary dreams are now riding on one competition.
Everybody ready? Go!
A team of experts observe each student closely, giving points for life skills and cooking technique, organization and cleanliness, presentation, and of course, taste.
5 minutes, 5 minutes.
But were these dishes tasty enough to bring in the big bucks?
Tuition scholarship, Rome scholarship.
All of that practice definitely paid off for Frankfurt High, whose students were awarded over $420,000, almost 2/3 of all the available scholarship money.
I have another and his brothers too. Erica,
With that kind of dough, these young chefs can already taste success.
Did you know there were different dice cuts? I get in trouble all the time. That's how I said small dice. And then she says, you minced. I go, mint? That's like a whole other category. I didn't even know. There are so many elements in here. So we use this to set up a career possibility for kids. It's not over the head, it's like, now you're a pharmacist adding fractions of unlike denominators. It's just not real. But it's more general. It's subtle in here. But there are a couple. The work ethic is fabulous. I love that big football player saying, yeah, I'm working hard, but I like it, learning fast. Taught me how to chop. It's like, cool. I'm staying away from you, but that's cool. He's good with a knife, too. Big. Anyway, it's great, that element. And then there's another element in here in terms of there's a perseverance, but it's a group. You see this group of people. And it's a bit of advice that I got from a guy named Freeman Hrabowski. You may not know him. He's the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Time magazine last year named him one of the 100 most influential people in the world. He's on every board, won all these awards. The guy is amazing. What he has done is created pathways for disaffected kids, particularly disaffected kids of color, into careers in math and science. And he's just fabulous. And he said, you got to make sure that kids have a vision of who they can be. I said, I picture textbooks and science and math textbooks, and at the front of every unit there's a picture of a Latina woman in a lab coat. And it's like, that's just never worked. He said, no kid wants to be the exception, to be the loner. They want to belong. It's part of one of those drivers I'm going to talk a little bit more about being a part of a community. So we do whatever we can. We show groups. Who wouldn't want to be? You're all working hard, but you're working. You're with this cadre. That's cool, right? So giving kids a window, bringing people in to get a sense of who they can be. And then make sure that they get to experience it a little bit. So a lot of, we start with the application. So many math programs, it's a build-up. You learn the skills, and at the end of the unit, now we'll show you how to apply it. Application happens at the end. That is backwards. It's like teaching kids the skills of baseball without ever showing them the game of baseball. You got to see where it lives and let them play around. You think about your little kids or yourself when you first start learning soccer or baseball or basketball. You're terrible. You don't know what you're doing, but you're playing. You're in it. So give kids a place where they can mess around with it a little bit, even before they're good at it, so they know where it's going to go, where it's going to live. So we put these, I love simulations for this. It's like, okay, you saw these cooks, and we're opening up this whole area of hospitality. Now imagine you're a restaurant manager, and you've got to put on an event, and you've got to figure out how you're going to allocate your staff. What fraction is going to be cooks, cleaners, servers, and then you got to assign them to tables, and then you have to do it in a certain amount of time, and you run it, and did you do it? And if you didn't do it, okay, try it again. Mess around with it. And when you first do it, you don't know what you're doing, but over time you get better. So whether you're using lemonade stand or playing a stock market game or putting kids in a flight simulator, letting them mess around a little bit where the math lives without worrying whether or not they have the skills yet to do it, because they're often playing stuff and experimenting before they have the skills. But starting with the end so they have a picture of where it's going or where it could go, opening up possibilities for them. Where is that headed? Where is that going? So that long-term makes stuff interesting and give them a sense of the future. Let the world create the need. But as I said, interesting problems and impasses are only good if you believe you can succeed. So you have to build competence with confidence. Because here's the thing. The research says your perceived ability matters more than your actual ability. When you stumble and you get up and you say, I'm going to try again, you only try again if you believe that your next effort has a chance of success. We see this a lot with girls in math and science. They actually do better than boys, but don't believe that they're as capable. So they start to drop out over time. Your belief matters. And this really gets into this concept of fixed versus a growth mindset. Those of you who said, I'm just not a math person, that's an example of a fixed mindset. I'm either good at something or not good at it. And a growth mindset is different, where it's actually you believe that your effort can make you better. If I have a fixed mindset, why should I try? I'm just not good at it. Now, it wasn't that long ago that we all believed that our brains were fixed. The brain we were born with, after the first few years of development, that was the brain we were going to have for the rest of our lives. If you did an IQ test at 6 years old, that was going to be your IQ forever. And research dug in, and when we actually had a window into how the brain functions, we said, you know what, that's just not true. That your brain, even my aging, wrinkly old brain, when I learn something new, it physically changes. They call it neuroplasticity. You hear it all the time, and there are companies trying to leverage it in wacky ways. You know, I'm going to make your brain leverage. We're working with the research on neuroplasticity to make your focus and your attention. But our brains do change when we learn, physically change. And when Carol Dweck, working with struggling math students, middle school math students in New York City, taught that little fact that your brain is like a muscle and it changes with effort, she was able to shift them from a fixed mindset, I'm just not good at math, to one that valued effort. And when she made that change, you had a change in their trajectory. This is from their research in New York. And so at the time, they were calling it an entity view of intelligence. I'm born good at this or not good at it. And if you have an entity view in math, I'm either good at math or not, and it doesn't matter whether you're good wherever you are on the performance scale, because this fixed mindset is also true for high-performing kids, who math was always easy for me. And math is always easy for you. I'm good at it because it's easy for me. And I actually never look for when it's hard. I avoid things that are hard. But when you don't accept challenges, when you don't think that you can do it when you hit a challenge, no matter where you are, of course you're going to flatline because you stop trying. If you believe that I can do it with effort, I have an incremental view, you have a very different trajectory. And she was able to shift it for kids, to take kids who were flatlining and declining and put them on a different path. Because of course, if you try, your chance of success is much higher. All of us have fixed mindsets about some things and growth mindsets about others. I'll give you an example of a fixed mindset in my life. How many of you are video game players? I figured not that many because you don't even do Candy Crush. How many of your kids are video game players? All right, so this is where I'm with you. When my son was a teenager, he invited me to play Xbox with him, which is great. It's a great father-son bonding opportunity, and I get to shoot him, which is I'd wanted to do on occasion. So I'm settling in to do a little Xbox with him, and I know I'm in trouble right away because I'm looking for the joystick. I'm a little dated here, and I get this device with buttons, colors, and thumb things, and I'm like trying to figure it out, and then my son says, "Dad, you're dead." I didn't even know we started. I was like, just chill, you know, just don't start yet, you know, until I'm ready. But it's, Dad, you're dead. Dad, you're dead. Dad, you're dead. After several of those, what do I think? I think, you know, I'm just not good at this. I'm not even a digital immigrant, I'm a refugee. And he's a native, right? He's a digital native, he's a natural. What I forget is that he spent well more than the 10,000 hours necessary for expertise playing that game. I've chosen to use my time potentially more productively. But that feeling of inability, of incompetence, of just not being good at it is not that different from a kid sitting in a math class doing a worksheet, not doing well, struggling, and the kid next to him lifts through it. And he looks over there, math person, not math person. And when he goes home and tells his parents, you know, I didn't do that well in math today, and his parents say, you know, we weren't that good in math either. It's over. It's genetic, right? I'm in a non-math family. There's no reason for me to try because we're not good at math. And then you're done. And we have to shift that. And what Carol showed is that you can. Now, you can think about in your own life where you have fixed versus a growth mindset. Where in your life? It might be about video games. I'll give you examples for me. So a fixed mindset are those places where you say, I'm not. In a growth mindset, I can if. I have a fixed mindset. I know it. I admit it when it comes to dancing. You know, I'm not really a dancer. And that's the way I describe it when somebody says, get out on the dance floor. In the kitchen, I love cooking. I can do that if I can figure out how to do that. So I love a challenge in the kitchen. And in a kitchen, I'm looking for challenges, in fact. If I have a fixed mindset, I'm avoiding failure. I don't want to go out on the dance floor. People are going to laugh at me. I'm going to be embarrassed. I don't want to be humiliated. I don't want them to see me moving my lips as I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's like, what's wrong with you? So and my sense is everybody is looking at me. where I have a fixed mindset. As soon as somebody gets me on the dance floor, as soon as I make that mistake, I say, see, I told you I couldn't do it, and I'm done. It's confirmation of my inability. In the kitchen, I make a mistake. It's like, wow, what can I do to fix that? Oh, that was a little too salty. Oh, I know, I cooked that a little too long. I'm learning. For a lot of kids in math, I can't do it. As soon as they make a mistake, I told you I couldn't do it, and they're done. As soon as they hit a challenge, forget it. We got to shift them over here. We got to shift ourselves over here. Those of you who say, I'm not a math person, you got to be over here. And you can be. You are. We can make that happen. To do that, we have to shift our relationship with failure. And we don't do that good a job in school right now because often what we do is we reward the kid who got it quickly. Oh, you got that so fast. You're so smart. What does that mean for everybody else who didn't get it quickly? I must not be smart. Right? What I should be saying, you got that so quickly. I'm sorry. I wasted your time. We obviously did something you already knew how to do. You didn't learn anything at all. I got to give you a better challenge next time. I should be looking at the kid who said, wow, that took you 8 tries. I'm so impressed. I love the way you tried that again. And how did you shift your strategy when it didn't work the first time? That's what I should be praising. Learning happens when you fail. If you only did things you already know how to do, you'd learn nothing. We have to stop praising the easy part and praise the struggle. That's where the learning happens. It's not like kids don't mind failing. In games, they fail 80% of the time. Those video games they're playing, success is rare. In fact, if it was only successful, they'd stop playing because it would be boring. You're looking for a challenge there. In school, you hit that challenge, and it means I'm stupid. I struggled. In a game, you hit that challenge, you go, oh, wow, what can I do differently? Let me try it again. This time I'm going to try it another way. That's what we have to be reinforcing. So there is, in school is the one place we should embrace mistakes. It's the place where you learn. All of us, as teachers, as students, that's what it's about. So one way to do that is we have to give kids a running start, because if they don't believe they can do it, right? We persevere when we believe we can succeed. And, but we need evidence. It's not enough to say, you know what, I know you can do it, just keep trying. Why should she believe me, right? If you have shaky confidence and you hit that stumbling block, it's like, forget about it. So you need some evidence that you're good. So we like to talk about giving kids a running start. And our advisors, we worked with some folks in Singapore to learn about math. Now, why would you go to Singapore to learn about helping struggling students? Aren't they all good in Singapore? They weren't. When Singapore became independent, there were about 60% of the population was illiterate. It was a very purposeful buildup of capacity. And how did they do that? And they're still working with their struggling students. And their guidance was give a gradual slope. What does that mean? Well, you see it actually in games. One of the way games get you hooked is they get you to believe you can do it. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the little app game called Slice It. It's fun. It's free. Yeah, all right, you got it. It's simple, right? It's like you're just making things into equal parts. That's all. So the first level is slice that square in half. Shows you how to do it. I can do that. Take your finger, zip. Slice that circle in half. I can do that. All right, let's make a little more. You got 2 cuts. Make that triangle into 3 equal pieces. Oh, how am I going to do that? That's level 4. So it's given me, I can do it. Oh, well, let me think about that. And I can try it. I slice here. And it's like, hey, you know, hey, nice. Try for 5 stars. Try it again. Gives me a little feedback. Mistake. Didn't quite get it all. That's cool. Try it again. Learn from this. That's what it's about. It's very gentle. And then it builds up. It's like, OK, try this. 2 cuts to make 3 equal pieces in that. All right, wait a minute. I got to think about this one. But now I believe that I can do it. And I also know that if I can't do it, I'm going to see the results, and I can try again. I'm not embarrassed. Nobody's paying attention. It's great. I can do it until I get it right. That's what we're talking about, a gradual slope. Give kids some confidence right away. If you imagine this is the math that you're teaching, right? And for any kid, you could know what they know and can do, the edge of their competence. And then you look at that and you say, if I give them a problem out here, they're going like, I can't do that. And you know what? They probably can't, not without a lot of support. So it's like, I'm not, right? You give them a problem back here, it's like, I can do that, but if I keep doing that, it's boring. But this is the place where you start to build that confidence. Give them that ramp up starting back here, and quickly as you can get to that edge. Because just beyond that edge, that's where if you give them a problem, that's where they feel, I'm good. Look what I did. I did something that's a little beyond me. We like that. We like that challenge. And that's your zone of proximal development. Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. That space is just a little beyond what you're able to do. And we like it because we actually get a chemical hit. A little bit of frustration is good. How many of you do puzzles? Right? And so you know, you don't like doing, you're looking, it's like, oh, that's an easy puzzle. I don't want to do that. That's too easy. You want one that's a challenge. One of my colleagues, a guy, Jesper Juhl, just wrote a book called The Art of Failure, and he talks about the paradox of actually seeking out something we don't like. We seek out failure in puzzles and in games. We actually don't like failure, but failure is an indication of a challenge, an impasse. We get stuck. We like overcoming that because our brains actually crave growing. We get a chemical hit when we solve a problem. The anticipation of overcoming an obstacle gives us something that the research says is like taking cocaine. That's what the research says. I wouldn't know. But this is, we actually get a physical reward. It feels good. You know how satisfied you are when you do a crossword puzzle or a can or whatever it is. You do one that was a little bit hard, and you go like, you feel good. It's actually a physical feeling. Learning is its own reward then. We want kids to get that chemical hit. But again, it only comes if you try, if you believe you can do it. So part of this is shifting that reference point for kids. If they believe that failure is bad, we have to shift their expectation. So everything is relative. And there's a mind experiment that Daniel Kahneman, behavioral psychologist, wrote a wonderful book called Thinking Fast or Slow. And he talks about this little mind experiment. So if you imagine that you take your left hand and you put it in a bowl of ice water, and you take your right hand and you put it in a bowl of hot water, not too hot, I don't want you to get burned. You put them in there, it's like, wow, that's cold, that's hot. Then you take your hands out and you put it in a bowl of room temperature water. How does that feel? With one hand, it feels warm. With the other hand, it feels cool. It's all about your reference point. It's all relative. And we shift reference points all the time. Setting a reference point matters. Marketers do this all the time. Is this a bargain or not? Well, compared to what? You have to set up a reference point. So what does that mean? Well, here's an example in education of setting a reference point. When first-generation students, first-generation college, first-generation of family go to college, that population of students has a very high dropout rate. They go, they don't know what to expect, they feel like they don't belong when they struggle, and they drop out. When those same students are shown a video of students who look like them, and in that video, those students that look like them say, you know, I came to college, wasn't sure what to expect, I was excited, but then I had troubles making friends, and my grades started to falter, but I stuck with it, and things came around, and now I'm doing okay. When they're shown that video, their reference point is now different. They expect to struggle, and their GPAs go up, and their graduation rate goes way up. You just shifted the reference point. You set a bar, oh, struggle, of course, that's what I expected. So we have to do that in our classrooms. We need to do that. We can do that with our world. So here's an example, right? You're coming back to school, you want to say, okay, guys, let's reactivate our math brains. So let's start with an easy one. Wow. What about the kid who can't do the easy one? I'm done for the day. Maybe I'm done for the year. I couldn't even do the easy one. The difference between that and, all right, here, this might take a few tries. Same problem. I get it right away. Wow, I'm pretty good. I don't get it right away. No, well, it was supposed to take a few tries. Our words matter. How we set it up sets the expectation. What's the frame of reference for these guys? Is it supposed to be easy and I can't do it? Oh, but if it's supposed to be hard and I can do it, or I can't do it, I'm safe either way. We can model it, make mistakes, and show kids how to learn from them. You know, you're working on something on the board, and it's like, wow, that's not right. Huh. Let the students help you find out what's wrong, and model. It's like, wow, that's a good mistake. I'm not going to do that again. It's okay. That's part of the learning experience. If you're perfect, you set the expectation that they should be perfect. That's not how learning happens. It's okay to learn from mistakes. Use examples. Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. He's the one, he wrote about the Beatles, right? That's where the 10,000 hours to get expertise comes from. The Beatles spent 10,000 hours playing in little clubs in Germany before they came back to the UK and were a hit because it was hard work. Genius is not born. Expertise comes with hard work. The research is crystal clear. Hard work, deliberate practice, that's what leads to expertise. Yes, some things come easier to other people for a while. We all hit a wall, and it's hard work that gets us over that wall. That's what we want to model. Talk about perseverance or resilience. Thomas Edison, 1,600 different combinations before he got the filament right for the light bulb. Let kids know that's genius. Genius is the willingness to keep trying and being smart about how you keep trying. Not keep doing the same thing over and over again, right, and expecting a different result. What can I do differently? How do I learn from what failed? That's what we want to show them. That's where genius comes from. That's where expertise comes from. Teach them about their minds. This is what Carol Dweck did. She actually taught people about their brains. Teach them about growth mindset. This is a schematic of the brain of a London cab driver. Their brains are a little bit different. To get a license to drive a cab in London, you actually have to have memorized and know all the streets and all the pathways. As part of the test, you're given a starting point and an end point, and you have to talk about the different ways you can get there. That has to be in your brain. So they study hard. And in fact, part of their hippocampus, which manages spatial navigation, is bigger than in other people. Their brains physically change. It does. There are examples in the literature. She's taught kids about the poor little rats that they used in a study. Half the rats were given wheels and all kinds of stuff to play with, and the other half the rats were given the equivalent of a remote control and a TV and a couch. And so they left the rats do their thing for a while, and then they killed them, sliced off their skulls, and weighed their brains. And the rats who'd been given the stuff to play with, their brains were more massive than the rat couch potatoes. Use it, it grows. It's like a muscle. It's not a muscle, but it's like a muscle for kids to think about. You know, it's kind of, I want kids to be, you know, kids start working out and then they're stopping in front of the mirror, you know, like I think there's muscle there now. And I want them preening like, I think my brain's a little bigger over here right now because I'm working hard. So teaching them about their brains, they like it. It worked. And teaching them strategies for how to actually, what do I do when I struggle? What's my next path? If we want kids to struggle, to have mistakes, we have to give them feedback. You can't learn from failure without feedback, right? You have to keep doing, that worked, let me keep doing that. That didn't work, I got to change that. Imagine practicing putting without seeing whether or not the ball goes in the hole, right? I do 100 putts and I'll get a report next week. No way. Shooting free throws without seeing whether or not the ball goes in the basket. Can't do it. Or something we'd never do, give kids a math worksheet without knowing or not they're doing it right. For all we know, they're practicing the wrong thing and getting really good at it. I've got that bad procedure down. I'm automatic with it now. That's great. We have to give them feedback. This is one of the places where technology is good. Digital games, digital environments are great at giving automatic feedback. You can't keep up with paper and pencil all the time. So using technology can help you do that. Simulations are great. That's one of the things I love about simulations. They're these trial and error spaces, and you get feedback. I tried that. What did that look like? Using manipulatives, real or virtual. I add a third and a half, and I get 2/5, but I add the pieces, and it doesn't look like 2/5. Well, something's wrong here. And giving kids that feedback that they can respond to gets them in that iterative process that is at the root of how we learn. I tried it. I saw the results. That didn't work. I revise. I repeat until I get it right. That revision, I have to be smart. How do I actually revise? And when I do it, I own it. We rob kids of the feeling of that chemical hit of I figured it out when we step in and tell them the answer. And I know it's hard because we're in a rush, right? It's Tuesday in the 3rd week of November. I need to be at this part in the curriculum. I got to get this kid moving. Here's a trick that'll get you through. We have now taught them to sit back and let you do it for them. And we've robbed them of the good feeling that you get when you actually figure it out yourself. We have to let them struggle. And so it's a battle. But you know what? If you let them get that feeling, Now you can accelerate because they like it. You have to let them have that experience, right? And let them see that that failure leads to progress. We love having progress. In 2010, Harvard Business Review looked forward and said, what are the big ideas that are going to change business and the way we think about things going forward in the next decade? When workers sense they're making headway, their drive to succeed is at its peak. Seeing progress is huge, right? They repeated that. The power of small wins. Want to truly engage your workers? Help them see their own progress. That's what it's about. Marketers do this all the time. I travel a lot, so it's like only 37,000 more miles to platinum. All right, that's not that exciting to me. But you've seen these kinds of things. That seems more reasonable. This is all about making progress. I only got 2 more to get to my free burrito. Right? Oh, awesome. They actually did a study where they gave people one that like this had 10 blank ones, and they gave them another one that had 12 with 2 already filled in. Which one was more successful in getting people to come back? I already got 2 done. I'm making progress. Exactly. Right? That sense of progress. We see this when we're trying to lose weight or get in shape. We do this to ourselves. Nike's got this whole site. Run faster, run further, burn more calories. Setting up and seeing yourself get better. How much weight have I lost? How much further am I running? To see yourself getting better is really powerful. The whole Fuel Band is about that. Engaging yourself and seeing that. When you're traveling, and this is from Orlando Airport, you make the turn, 15 minutes left. You go to Disney World, you make a turn, it says 75 minutes left, and you feel good. Right? And you start counting. I only got 5 more turns till I'm inside. I don't even know what's inside, but I'm feeling great. I only got 5 more turns left. So we can help kids see themselves making progress. Games do this. How am I doing? We can do it with skills. How many have I got? I only have this many more left. Awesome. I'm making progress. I'm moving forward. We can get more and more sophisticated. That's what I'm working with Scholastic on. What we're doing here is being more sophisticated, not just getting better at the math, but getting better at the skills and the attitudes that underlie success. I'm persevering more. I'm going back and turning those 1-star games into 3-star ones, 2-star ones, 3-star ones. I'm coming back and trying again. I'm going above and beyond. I'm focusing. I'm getting streaks, looking for the characteristics that we want them to apply that will allow them to have more success. Let them see themselves getting better. That's really motivating. Now you want kids to feel like, I did it and it's mine. So here's the thing. Our brains are not rational. We are not rational beings, right? But we do rationalize. So when it comes to choice, if you made me do it, I must not have wanted to do it. We rationalize this. It's kind of like we rob ourselves of the sense of, we rob our kids of the sense of ownership when we say, you got to do it. Sometimes you have to do it. So intrinsic motivation is fueled by choice, undermined by outside control. So we want to give kids choice. However, we don't want to say, hey, guys, we're doing fractions today. Want to? Right? So it's not choice at that level, because you know what? We have to do it. But the research says we can make choices around the edge. We can give kids choice, and that actually matters to them. They feel ownership. So we can give them control over the place where it happens. In computer games and stuff like that, it's like around avatars. Choose your character. But it's the same thing as when kids are decorating their notebooks. That's my notebook where it's happening. I can draw on it. It's mine. In Singapore, I visited a school called the Northlight School. It's for the bottom 2% of the country. And in math class, one of the things they do, they have these clear plastic sheets, covers that come over the desk. And students can put pictures, drawings, cutouts of whatever they want on that desk. And the clear plastic cover comes over it. That's my desk. And not only does it give kids a sense of personalized space, it gives the teachers a window into who those kids are and what matters to them. It's really nice. So that's it. That's mine. That's where it's happening. You're still doing this math, but it's in my space. We can give kids a choice about how to get there. In Math 1A, we created this brain arcade, and there are all these different games. You know what? There are different ways to get there. It's like, here are the games we recommend. You pick whatever one you want. I don't care. It's going to be good no matter which one you pick. But they now have choice. They owned it. I like that game. I'm going to do that. Great. That's another place you're going to practice. So giving them different ways to get to the same place and teaching them strategies. So it's not just this rote stuff. Make 10. How are you going to make 10? Well, let's see. 9 and 1 I could do. 6, 3 and 1. 5, 3, and 2. I got all these choices when I actually have command of the math. So teaching them multiple strategies gives them control in a way, as long as you let them exercise it. Are people familiar with Fast Math? It's my first app. It's free. Just try it. It's really cute. OK, so anyway, that's all. There's a book called Nudge, although I like to call it Nudge. Which is a joke that really only works in New York. I don't know. I've tried it other places in the country. Anyway, one of the things they introduced in this book is this concept of choice architecture. The way you create choices matters. So they did these studies in school lunch lines. I want kids to take more vegetables. Actually, where you place the vegetables and how you light them matters in that selection. What is at the top choice and at the bottom matters in terms of what kids select. So giving them choice is great. Being smart about how you display it is something we can do too. I mean, we just want to manipulate our kids in a good way, right? Marketers manipulate us all the time. They're constantly trying to get us to buy things, to go places, to do stuff. You know what? Let's learn from that and put it to good use to get our kids to make good choices for themselves. So that's what it's about. Now, the other thing that we can do, and a place we can give kids control, is in the mistakes, not in the stakes. Not all mistakes are the same. So if you think about learning, you have, when you first start doing something, you're at the frontier. That's a term from a colleague, Amy Edmondson, at this Harvard Business School. She talks about learning mistakes at the frontier versus routine. I'm doing something at the beginning, and I actually get good at it. It becomes routine. So a mistake that's here, 0.8 plus 0.5 equals 0.13. If a kid's just learning decimals, and they hear this constant language of point this and point that, why wouldn't 0.5 and 0.8 be 0.13? That's a learning opportunity. I treat that mistake differently than I do a mistake over here where, you know what? You know what 5 plus 2 is. What's going on here? So not all mistakes are the same. I expect you to know this. You've gotten good at it. I treat this one differently. So when we're at that learning place, I want to be really failure tolerant. Not just tolerant, I expect mistakes. When you're first doing something, of course you're going to make mistakes. I want to see them because that means you're pushing yourself. And those are opportunities to learn. But ultimately, I don't want you to make those mistakes anymore. So I'm going to have low stakes here, and I'm going to keep raising the stakes as you get better. This is learning. This is instruction. This is getting better, where I want a lot of feedback on, am I getting better? This is where I'm making progress. And now, you know what? It's time to perform. And making that transition from practice, when am I good enough, to when I want to go on stage, maybe we can let kids into it. Let them know, this is when you're getting better. You let me know when you're going to perform. But you're going to have to perform. Let them step up and own it. And you know what? A lot of them will. But you have to let them know, you know what? Mistakes are cool here. I'm teaching you something new. I remember when my son poor son, who used to be smart and then became effortful as he became a victim of the research as I consumed it. He's, among other things, a musician. And I remember when they first started playing, he came home to play saxophone, 4th grade. And our dog was howling. It sounded so bad. And when the kids perform on stage, you can barely hear the music over their stomping, hot cross buns, keeping time. Of course it's terrible. It should be terrible. They don't know how to do it yet. Right? But you know what? He gets up there and he's like, I'm ready to perform. And he's good. But it's a pathway. And letting them know where they are in that pathway and have some control over it is great. And then this last piece about being part of a community. Status, our quest for status, for belonging, might be our most fundamental evolutionary trait. So, do I have time to tell? OK. So this is an odd bit of research, seemingly unrelated, but I find it so enlightening. So they're trying to figure out, where does risky behavior come from? Right? So collectively, risky behavior is valuable. Right? So I'm waiting for you to try that. If you don't die, I'll have some too. If you do, oh no, I'm not going to eat that. So for the rest of us, there's a benefit in this lovely woman taking a risk. What the heck does she get out of it, right? So they were trying to figure out, what does the person who takes the risk get? So they did a study of fish. And they found that, in fact, some fish, like some humans, are more willing to take risks than others. Some of us are like, I want to sit back and find out, which is good. We don't want everybody to go out and taste the food and die, then we'll all be gone. So you need people who are kind of, I'll wait and see, and you need other people who kind of step forward. And they found that fish are like that too, and that seems to be true in terms of diversity of personality. So then we want to figure out, well, what do those risky fish actually get? And when they found out, they set up this thing called predator investigation, where it's like there's a potential predator out there. Some fish has got to go out to find out, is it going to eat us? Well, that's great for everybody else, but the fish who goes out there, hey, so what does that fish who goes out there and comes back get? And what that fish gets is fish sex. Right? I mean, this is basic evolutionary value, right? It's like, that's what we want. We want to perpetuate the species. And that risky fish gets more fish sex. You can picture whatever you want. But I don't think it's that interesting. Maybe if you're a fish. Anyway, that they get more sex, fish sex, than the brightly colored fish, which is usually an indication of health. It's the whole peacock's feather and all this thing. It's like, I want to look like I'm a good mate. Good genes. And so that riskiness. But the thing is, the fish did not go out and take the risk unless the other fish were watching. Right? It's all about status in front of other people, in front of other members of the group. That's fundamental, who we are. We crave social acceptance. We want to look good in front of our peers. Right? It's not just us. It's deep nature in our beings. And so it's actually, the evidence says self-efficacy and grades are tended to be tied to your peer group. If you're high-performing with a high-performing group of peers, you push yourself up. If you're low-performing with a low-performing group of peers, you push yourself down because you want to fit in. And you've seen those kids who are they'll show off and be trouble in class to show off to that peer group that sort of has now valued that because they're embarrassed to look stupid. I'd rather look like I don't care than look like I can't do it, that I'm dumb. Humiliation avoidance is really important. So we have to build a classroom culture that makes it okay to make mistakes. We can build individual self-efficacy, but if the culture that you create in your classroom doesn't allow it to happen, we can squash it for the individuals. There's an interesting study that came out just this year, a group of researchers in Germany. They were actually looking at what they called the error climate in the classroom. What's that classroom culture look like? And really, the research talks about this mastery environment versus a performance one. A mastery one is about personal progress. Am I getting better? A performance one is, am I winning? Right? One's about getting better, the other's about winning. If you're a struggling student who always comes in last, that's not so great. This is pretty good. If I have a history of, I don't want to run a race where I come in last all the time. That's embarrassing. But seeing myself get better, that's pretty cool. If you're a high-performing student who believes you have a chance of winning, that's great. Can we turn these kids into those kids, welcoming them into a performance environment? Maybe. Maybe that's part of shifting the stakes. Here, I choose when and with whom to share growth. Look what I'm doing, look much better. It's not where I rank against everybody else, but how I'm improving. In a performance class, you're always on display. So it's a lot about the relationships you have in there. It matters. The students are looking, who cares about what I'm doing? So your relationship with your student, and this is part of what they talk about in this error climate. What do you do with mistakes in the classroom? Do students in your classroom believe that making a mistake will hurt their grade? Do you take mistakes and strategically use them for learning? How do you respond to wrong answers? Do you provide support after a wrong answer? That helps establish the classroom culture. And then you want parents playing with you, right? You want to be praising what the students do rather than who the student is. And this is what I was saying. It's like the research on saying, oh, you're so smart. Oh, you're a genius. That's bad for kids. Because that means that, oh, I'm good at this. And there are kids at the high-performing level who've never taken a risk in their lives. There are kids with perfect scores on their SATs who Harvard and Yale. I interview for Yale. My wife organizes interviews for Harvard. We don't want those kids. They don't want those kids. They don't want perfect kids. They want kids who've struggled and overcome a struggle. They want kids with a growth mindset, not ones who say, I'm good, and I only do things that I'm good at. That's not about learning. Right? That's about doing stuff. And some kids come with a lot of skills. They come with a lot. They've had a great upbringing, good genes, all that stuff, and so things have been easy for them. They're not learners. We need kids who take challenges at all levels. That's what we want. So that's what I said to my son. He went from being a genius, just graduated from Harvard, applying to MD, PhD programs, musician. It's like he went from being a genius, I wish I could get my wife to stop calling him that, to being effortful, analytical, resilient. What are the things that he does that other people can model? Because if I call you a genius, what does that mean for everybody else? If I say, that was great the way you persevered, you tried a different strategy, oh, that's what I need to do. Other people can follow that. So getting parents in the game, you're never going to get grandparents to play with you. Just, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. But getting them in the game as well, and then the peers, that matters. Will the classroom, the peers in the classroom accept mistakes? Or are they going to make a student feel humiliated if he makes a mistake in front of his peers? You have to teach your kids how to do this. You have to practice it. The words aren't there. As a parent, I know, who's tried to do this in the research, like, I don't know what else to say about my kid. Like, oh, you're smart. Oh, no, I can't say that. Oh, you're such a genius. No, you're brilliant. No. What he did may have been brilliant, but talking about him fixes his view of himself. I want him to take challenges. So what can we do? Well, here's one thing we can do is add the word yet to everything. A simple thing to do. Carol Dweck talked about this recently. What a great word, right? So it's like, you haven't mastered those skills yet. Shift the expectation. Use our language powerfully. You're not explaining the connection between the graph and the equation clearly yet. For all of you, for all of us, we haven't reached all the students yet. But of course we're going to. That's the expectation. Of course we are. Using that word yet is such a powerful way. I want to leave you with that word and an image or a saying. One of our colleagues in Singapore, a guy I work with, Li Peng Yi, he's great. He's a little like Yoda. In one, he's old, short, with big ears. So he looks a little like Yoda. And he also speaks in Confucian aphorisms, in these sayings. So one of the things he said to us, he said to me, is like, if you think you can catch the bus, you will run for it. Like, what a great image, you know? Because if it's like, if you're standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus, there's really no engagement or whatever. If you're back here and the bus is coming, and it's way, you know, you're just like, I'll wait for the next one. But if you're close enough that a burst of speed will get you there, you do run for it. And you know what? You feel really good when you catch it. It feels even better when sometimes you miss it. I got it this time. That's the feeling we want for our kids. That's the place you're trying to create. Is what, you know, we want to help you be driving a bus that your students are constantly running to catch and feeling great when they get on it. And you know what? You'll feel great too. But constantly, one challenge after another that is achievable, that you believe you can get to, building that confidence in kids, that's what about we can do it. And we're coming into a new year with building your own mindset in order to build the mindset of our kids.